Hi, everybody. Welcome to another class on Web Yeshiva. We're picking up where we left off before last summer. We're in the middle of the Amidah, and we're up to the blessing on prosperity, Barech Aleinu. I'm going to spend a lot of time in the next hour talking about rain and when we need rain. So I hope that's your thing. This is one of the blessings that has a choose your own adventure element to it. You've got to check what day it is and then decide what words to say. So let's start where we usually start, the Gemara in Megillah that talks about the order of the Amidah. And it goes through each of the brachot. It asks, Maro lama birkat hashnim b'tishi'it. Why did the rabbis establish the blessing of, it's called birkat hashanim, the blessing of the years, but it's really a blessing for prosperity. Why is that the ninth blessing? Amma Rebbe Alexandri, Keneged Mafki'ei Sha'arim. It is because of the people who try and inflate the prices across the board, but particularly of food. The people who inflate prices to impoverish people. Dichtiv Shavor Zra Resha, to break the arm of the wicked, which refers to extortion. The David ki Amra, and when David HaMelech said that verse of Tehillim, B'tishit Amra, he said it in the chapter 9 of Tehillim, which actually is chapter 10, but the way the Gemara counts, the first chapters 1 and 2 are all one long chapter. So the point here, well, we'll see Rashi in a minute, but the point is that the blessing of prosperity, the ninth blessing, is a blessing that food particularly, but all prices, should be at a reasonable level and nobody should be impoverished. Rashi explains why this verse is connected to inflating prices, right? So why is Shvor Zra Resha connected to price gouging? This refers to people who inflate the prices of produce, umafkiin et hashar, and speculate, who inflate the prices, the market price. How do we know it refers to people who inflate prices artificially? Dichtiv Bahi Parshata, because it says in the same chapter of Tehillim, Yarev B'mestar, Karia B'sucho, Yarev Lachtof Ani. It says, lie in wait like a lion to entrap the poor. Ki halistim orev et ani, do robbers steal from the poor? That's the opposite of what Robin Hood did. Hala et ashir hu orev. Usually they lie in wait for rich people. Elba mifkir sharim hakatuf midaber rather refers to people who artificially inflate prices. Sharav datam lanim, because their intent, or the people who suffer most from this, are the poor people. And David prayed for those to end this practice. Break the arms of the wicked who try to inflate the prices and make plenty of food in the world. And in this way, you'll look out for wickedness and you won't find it. So it means he'll try to inflate the prices, he won't succeed. So that's the reason this blessing is number 9. We don't mention inflation in the words at all. It focuses a lot on rainfall. And I just want to say that many of us, are not directly affected by rainfall in our daily lives. If it rains, I've got to wash my car and I've got to wear a raincoat, or I'm taking an umbrella when I go outside, but it doesn't directly seem to impact me. But that's a mistake, because the global economy is dependent on rainfall. I spent too long reading papers on how primarily too much rainfall harms the global economy. But even if we're sitting and we're davening and thinking, well, what do I care about rain? The answer is that, and I suppose going in, I thought that war would have had a more direct impact on prosperity. For example, the war in Ukraine means there's less wheat available globally. Wheat prices go up, bread prices go up, pasta disappears from the shelves, and that's because of war rather than from famine. In my lifetime, the most famous famine was Ethiopia and Somalia, which was caused by warlords fighting. The food insecurity in Gaza is caused by Hamas rather than rainfall. But there is definitely an impact of rain on the global economy. And we should also pray for peace, but we should also care about rainfall. Just the words, this I think is the prayer that has the most difference between Ashkenazi and Sephardi versions. Ashkenazim, well, it's true. Baruch Aleinu Hashem Elokeinu Shana Hazot. God bless this year. Vet kol minei tvuata l'tova, and all the produce for good. Vetain, and then in the summer we say bracha, give a blessing. In the winter we say ten talo matale bracha, give dew and rain for a blessing. Al pnei ha'adama, across the earth, v'sabeinu mituvecha, satisfy us with your goodness. V'varech shnotenu kashnim atavos, and bless this year like the best of years. Baruch atah Hashem v'varech hashanim. Blessed are you, God, who blesses the years. So for Ashkenazim, the difference between summer and winter is a total of 2 extra words. The Yekis obviously set their clocks and tell their wives they'll be slightly home from shul because of these 2 extra words, but it's not a huge difference between summer and winter in terms of words, whereas for Sephardim, they have an entirely different prayer. In the summer, they say the following: Barachenu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol ma'aseh yadenu, bless all our handiwork. Uvarech shnosenu b'talei ratzon, bless our year with dew of favor. Bracha unedava, blessing and benevolence. Fine. And this is not my translation, by the way. I would not use so many ampersands. Otiach ritach chaim v'sova v'shalom. May the end of it be life and plenty and peace. Kishanim tovot lebracha, like the best years. Ki kel tov u'meitiv ata u'mevrech hashanim, because you are a good God who does good and blesses the years. Baruch atah Hashem mevrech hashanim. Blessed are you who blesses the years. That's the summer. In the winter, a much longer blessing. Bless this year. So the same phrase of talu matar. Rava panei tevel v'sava et haolam kolo mituvecha. Make it sated or watered the face of the earth and sate the world with your goodness. Malei adin brichotecha. Fill our hands with your blessing, with the wealth of your gifts of your hands. Shamra v'tzila shana hazeh mikol tavara, save and protect this year from everything bad. Or mikol minei mashchit, or mikol minei paraniot, any kind of destroyers or any kind of bad things. V'aseh la tikva tova v'achrit shalom, make it full of good hope and a peaceful ending. Chus v'rachem aleinu, have mercy on us. And our produce and our fruits. Bless us with good, blessed rain. And may the end of it be good, sated and peaceful. Like the good years, best years. Because you are a good God who blesses the years. Baruch atah Hashem mevarech hashanim, blessed who blesses the years. So Ashkenazim Sephardim here are quite different. The Sephardim have to get up an hour earlier to fit this bracha in when they change from summer to winter. So now let's look at a few questions. We outside of Israel. My plan is to start outside of Israel, talk about why that is what it is, and then what do you do in different places which need rain. Like we pray for rain when the Jews who wrote the Babylonian Talmud needed rain. The current Jewish population of Iraq is about 7 Jews, and yet millions of Jews around the world are praying for rain according to, well, not quite, but according to the schedule that was best suited for Iraq 1,500 years ago. Why are we still doing that? Why are we not praying for rain in the USA, in the UK, in New Zealand, in Australia, in wherever we live in the world? How did we end up in December 5th? This is the only place in the Siddur where we make a change based on the Gregorian calendar. So why December 5th? And we'll see why that is the wrong date, and we do it anyway. And then in Israel, we're going to start from the 7th of Cheshvan saying this prayer. And the reason we'll see is to give people who came to Aliyah L'Regel, all the people who came from Bavel to Jerusalem for Sukkot, we don't want them to get wet when they're going home, so we give them 2 weeks to move slowly with their donkeys and their camels and whatever to leave Israel, cross over the Jordan River, and then we start asking for rain after that. But nowadays that we have no temple, and if people come to Jerusalem for Sukkot, they get on a plane and fly back the next day. Why do we still in Israel say the prayer at the wrong time? And yes, Michael, you're jumping ahead. You're not. Shulchan Aruch does not use November, but the Beit Yosef does. Yosef Ko does in Beit Yosef, and we'll see that he uses November. Okay, so those are some questions. Again, I want to look at the Talmud, the Gemara that says it, then look at the Rishonim and how they understand that Gemara, and then look at some modern day applications and see what we work out. So there's three main texts that talk about when to start praying for rain or how to deal with this blessing. The first source is the Gemara in Ta'anit on Daf Yud. The Mishnah says, right? Just to clarify, we started saying Mashiv Haruch U'Merita Geshem on Shemoneh Atzeret / Simchat Torah, and we do that wherever we are in the world, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, Israel, not Israel. That is praising God as the God who causes wind and rain to fall, because at the time that rain may fall, and we're not asking there for anything. We're just describing God as a God of rainfall. In this blessing, we ask God for prosperity. We ask God for rainfall. So we have to work out when is the best time to do that. So the Mishnah says on the 3rd of Cheshvan, we ask for rain. That is the Tana Kama, who turns out to be Rabbi Eliezer, I believe. Rabban Gamliel says on the 7th of Cheshvan, Chamisha Asayom Achar Chag, 15 days after Sukkot, Kadesh Yagia Achron Shibishol and Nahar Prat, so that the last visitor who's come to Israel for Aliyah L'Regel can get to the Euphrates River and not get rained on while he's going home. Now, the Mishnah was written in Eretz Yisrael. This is the halacha for Eretz Yisrael, and we follow the halacha of Rabban Gamliel, not the Tana Kama, so we do it from the 7th. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, halacha Rabban Gamliel. Fine. Tanya Chananya Omer Ubegola ad Shishim B'Tkufa. Chananya says that in Galut, which in his time meant Bavel, it's not where all the Jews lived, because there were Jews living in Egypt, there were Jews living in Rome, there were Jews living in other places, but the rabbis who wrote the Babylonian Talmud were talking about Bavel, and they said, you don't start saying this prayer until 60 days after the equinox, after the autumnal, the fall equinox. Amar Rav Huna bar Chia, Amar Shmuel, halacha kechananya. And these rabbis who also lived in Bavel said the halacha is like Chananya. And why is that? Because that's when they needed rain. So I'm going to actually skip the next paragraph. It says, is it? Yes, it is. So then they asked a question, the rabbis of the Talmud, Yom Shishim kilifnei Shishim or kilachar Shishim? When we count 60 days, are we counting inclusively or exclusively? Does day 60, is that the day we start saying this, or we start the day after? Tashma. So let's see. Rav Amar Yom Shishim kilachar Shishim. Rav says that the 60th day is when you start saying this prayer. Shmuel Amar Yom Shishim kilifnei Shishim. And Shmuel says the 60th day is before. You don't yet say it. Now, Rav and Shmuel lived in a Nahardia and I've gone blank. Lived in two different cities in Bavel, Pumbedita, two different cities, and presumably their cities needed rain at different times. So I would have been happy if the Gemara would have answered, it depends where you live. And if you live in Rav's town, do like Rav, and if you live in Shmuel's town, do like Shmuel. But the Gemara doesn't say that. Amar Rav Nachum bar Yitzchak Simanech al ba'u maya, tatai lo ba'u maya. The higher place requires water, where Rav lived, and the lower place, where Shmuel lived, did not require water. So again, it should be context specific. But Amar Rav Papa Hilchata Yom Shishim Kal Achar Shishim. Rav Papa comes, he lives 3 generations after Rav and Shmuel. He says the halacha is the 60th day is like after 60. We start saying the prayer on the 60th day. You could argue Rav Papa is just talking about his time 3 generations later, his place. But he says that halacha, he seems to be saying this is the halacha for every place and every time. That's the first Gemara. So very clear. Inside Israel, you start on the 7th of Cheshvan, 15 days after Sukkot, so that the visitors can leave. Outside Israel, you start on the 60th day after the equinox. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about adding in personal prayers during the Amidah. Right? The men of the Great Assembly compiled the Amidah to be a generic, to cover all eventualities, but as an individual, I might want to add my own specific prayers for certain things, like a prayer for a specific sick person, or a prayer for a specific, job opportunity. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel halacha shoel adam tzarachav b'shomei tefillah. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that the halacha is you can ask for anything you want in Shomei Tefillah. That's the last of the central blessings of the Amidah, and it says that God hears our prayers. You can add in whatever you want there. Amar Rav Yehuda b'Id Rav Shmuel bar Shilat mishmei Rav afal pi she'amru shoel adam tzarachav b'shomei tefillah. Even though they say you should ask for your personal requests in Shomei Tefillah, if you want to include something in each blessing that's relevant to that blessing, then you can do so. So the blessing for wisdom, you want to ask for help passing your exam, you could do that there. In the blessing for forgiveness, you want to ask specific forgiveness, you could do that there. The blessing for etc. etc. Amar Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav afal pisha amru shol adam tzachav b'shomei tefillah. Rav Chia says the same thing, even though they said you can ask whatever you want in Shomei Tefillah. Im yesh lo choleh b'toch beito omer birkat cholim. If somebody has a sick person, they should include that in Rifa'enu. Im tzarich leparnasah, if somebody needs parnasah, needs a livelihood, omer birkat hashim. They should add that in birkat hashanim. And that is the halacha. We'll see this contradiction, basically, what I'm trying to allude to. In Bavel, they need rain 60 days after the equinox, but I live in London, and I need rain at a different time of year. So can I change the words of my prayer for rain to suit my local... this Gemara seems to imply that I can ask for my... I'm a farmer, I need rain now, so I should be able to do that in Birkat HaShanim, even though that's not what it says in the Siddur. And the third source is the people of Nineveh had this very question. They needed rain at a different time. Nineveh, I guess, would be in Syria today, maybe Turkey, somewhere further, directly north of Israel, whereas Bavel is more to the east of Israel. Shalchu le b'nei Nineveh le Rebbe. So the people of Nineveh, and as we know from Sefer Yonah, Nineveh is a very big city. The people of Nineveh sent a letter to Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, and they say, Kugon Anan, people like us, Dafir b'tchufat Tammuz b'ayin mitra, even in the middle of summer, we need rain. Hechi navid, what should we do? Ki yechidim daminan, are we considered, a large city of individuals, and therefore we should pray for this in our Shomei Tefillah blessing as private people? Or Krabim daminan, or are we considered a group, a large group? Well, he's going to say, if we're individuals, then we would say it in Shomei Tefillah, because you can ask for anything you want in Shomei Tefillah. Or Karabim Daminan, or Birchat Hashnim. Or are we like a whole city, a whole group, and therefore we could include it in the blessing for years? Shalach lehu Rebbe sent back, Ki yachidim tamitu ubishomei tefillah. You are. I don't care that there's 10,000 of you. You're still individuals, and you would say it in shomei tefillah. Meitvei. So the statement of Rebbe is attacked from a Baraita. Amar Rav it's strange that this is a Meitvei, and the Gemara is going to. But Meitvei is an attack from a higher source. So Meitvei would be used for an Amora, someone from the Talmud. They'd say, you can't contradict a Mishnah. And it's strange, and this will be the answer, it's strange that Rebbe Yehud HaNasi, who wrote the Mishnah, is being attacked from a Braita, which is material from the same time as the Braita, which is not a stronger authority than Rebbe himself. Anyway, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Ematai, when does this principle apply that we say the prayer for rain at these times? Bisman shashnim ketiknan, when the years are as they're supposed to be, meaning the seasons work out properly, it's an appropriate year. V'Yisrael shrim ad matan, and Jews, Israel, are living on their land. Aval bisman hazeh, but nowadays, even though Rabbi Yehuda lived in Israel, but still nowadays, hakol lefi hashanim, it depends on the year. Hakol lefi hamekomot, it depends on the location. Hakol lefi hazman, it all depends on the time. Meaning, you should ask for prayer for rain at the time that suits you and your location. So this implies that the people of Nineveh who needed rain at a different time should, as a community, be able to pray for it at that time. So the Gemara answers back, are you attacking Rebbe from a Mishnah? Rebbe Tana, who Palik, Rebbe is also a Tana. He disagrees with that Baraita. It's a machloket, and the halacha is like Rebbe, right? My Havi Allah, what's the conclusion? Rav Nachman Amar Birkat Hashanim, Rav Sheshama B'Shomei Tefillah, is a machloket Amarayim in Bafel. Rav Nachman says you would say it, if a community needs it at a certain time, you would say it in the prayer for rain. Rav Shesha says you always say it in the individual prayer Shomei Tefillah. Hilchata B'Shomei Tefillah, the halach is you say it in Shomei Tefillah. So those are our sources. Now let's see how that plays out. What do we do in other countries? Right? If you're not living in Bavel, right, and if you don't need rain 60 days after the autumnal September equinox, Rambam says here in his commentary on the Mishnah, Kol Zeh Be'eretz Yisrael U'Baratzot HaDamot Lo. All of this, the saying the prayer for rain 2 weeks after Sukkot, applies only to Israel and countries that have a similar climate to Israel. Also, the Mishnah continues talking about fasting when there's not enough rain at the right times. That all applies to Israel, and other places that have a similar climate. But in other countries, and the Rambam has lived in Spain and in Morocco and in Israel and in Egypt, other countries, you should ask for rain at the time that rain is good for your country. Right, you need it in that place. And we would consider that date when you need rain as if it's the 7th of Mar Cheshvan for your country. And if the rain doesn't fall at that time, then you'd start the series of fasts that would be appropriate. Some places the rain doesn't come until Nisan, which is the spring in Israel. There's places that in Mar Cheshvan it's their summertime, and rain is not a blessing then. It's terrible for them. It's bad. It can kill them, destroy their crops. Why would these people, how could these people ask for rain at a time that it would be detrimental to them? This would be a lie. They don't want rain. Because the Devami and Rambam says this is just obvious. This is clear. That's his commentary on the Mishnah. So then he comes to the Mishnah Torah, he writes the halacha, and he says not quite the same thing. Right? It sounds to me, at any rate, not only to me, also to the Rosh, but it sounds from his commentary on the Mishnah as though each place should say in Birkat HaShanim, they should start saying Ten Talomah Talivracha at the time that is best for them, and they should not be saying it at the time that's bad for them. But he says in Mishnah Torah differently. Right, from the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, you ask for rain. As long as you keep doing this. This is only in Eretz Yisrael. But in Bavel, Syria, Egypt, places like that, you start asking for rain 60 days after the September equinox. Then he says, places that need rain in the summer, like islands far away, they ask for rain when they need it, but only in Shomei Tefillah, not as a public prayer, but like the people of Nineveh as a private prayer. Okay, fine. So from the Mishnah, his commentary on the Mishnah, I thought Rambam was going to say that this blessing of Birkat HaShanim, we should do it according to location, but he ends up saying, no, publicly, in the communal prayer, you always follow the Siddur, but in your private prayer, you should do what you need to do. Now, the Rosh doesn't like this at all. Rambam is 12th century, Rosh is 14th century, and living in, Spain, Germany. He moved around a bit. And he says, and I'm just trying to work out in terms of time, but this is a story that happened, and it's already got to Pesach time, and they need rain, right? In this place where he's living, they need rain then, and the Rosh is upset, and he says, why? Just hit to the last line. Why don't we keep asking for rain until Shavuot? Sure, we're supposed to stop on the first day of Pesach, but here and now, we need rain. Let's keep praying for rain until Shavuot. So the Rosh said this. The people around said, that's a very good idea. Let's tell the elders. They said, let's do that. Let's keep praying for rain because we need rain now. They told the Shliach Tzibor that the next day, which was Pesach, he should keep mentioning rain, even though it was not the time for rain elsewhere, but it was where they were. They did this. They said these other prayers for rain. Some of the rabbis who had not been consulted were upset by this. And they said this was a bad thing. You shouldn't be praying for rain at this time, because rain objectively at that time is a curse, even though you in this place need it at this time. That's the Rosh's commentary in the end of the Chumash. And in a responsa, he says a similar idea, and he ends up saying, right? He says, I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to do this quickly. He's upset that people don't pray for rain at the proper time, and so he says, I'm just going to. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but he says, now I know I'm in the 4 lines from the bottom. I know all the countries I'm familiar with, the main time for rain is between Pesach and Shavuot. That's definitely considered the Rabbim. It's not individuals. That's the whole of Western Europe. Amar libi ata gia etaken mashe nit av etizeyamim Rabbim. I said, this is an opportunity, right? This drought that's happening is an opportunity for me to fix this that I've been kind of not strong enough to establish until now. Now people will listen to me because they really need rain. If they listen to me at this time, that would be great, and they will make this new rule. So the Rosh, unlike Rambam, or like Rambam in his commentary on the Mishnah, the Rosh wants to say that we say the prayer for rain at the appropriate time. I'm sorry, that was all the Rosh in his Tshuva. This is the Rosh on the back of the Gemara. I'm sorry, and same thing again. He says we should pray for rain when we need the rain, And he ends up by saying, "Provenza ra'iti shahayu shoalin et geshamim b'mar cheshvan v'yashar be'od be'enai." In Provence, he says, I see they start asking for rain already in Mar Cheshvan, which is before the equinox, because that's when they need rain, and I think that's a very good idea. So the Rosh is clear on what he thinks. The Rambam is clear not like that. And the Shulchan Aruch follows the Rambam, as he almost always does. The halacha is Birkat Hashanim tzrich lamar ba b'yamot geshamim v'tein talo mata. In this blessing, you pray for rain in the winter months. You start asking for rain outside of Israel. Shulchan Aruch lives. Either he was born and came as a young child, or certainly his family came from Spain. He lived in Sfat in Israel, but he says anyway, outside of Israel, you start praying for rain 60 days after the autumnal equinox. The 60th day is included. And in Israel, you start asking from the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, and you continue asking for rain until Pesach. After Pesach, you don't ask anymore. That's the main halacha. And then he says, individuals who need rain in the summer, they should not ask for it in this prayer of Birkat Hashem, of prosperity. They should ask only in the private prayers in Shomei Tefillah. Afilu ir gdola keninveh, or eretz achad kula, even a city as big as Ninveh, or a whole country. Kemos Farad bichlal, all of Spain, for example, or Ashkenaz bichlal, all of Germany. Ki yechedim damu, they are like individuals. B'Shomei Tefillah. However, says the Shulchan Aruch, im ba'aretz achad kula hetzrichim lemata b'mot chama ta'aba yachid v'shal mata b'chad hashanim. If it's a country a place where the whole country needs rain in the summer, and somebody made a mistake and asked for rain in the summer when you shouldn't be, but they need it anyway, then he says, he doesn't have to repeat the Amidah because his prayer is still valid, even though he said it at the wrong time. And the Mishnah Berurah says exactly this. I'm definitely going to run out of time, so I will not go through it. But the Mishnah Berurah says the main prayer should be what it says in the Siddur. But if in your country you need rain at a different time, you should say so in Shomei Tefillah. And he says that's the minhag. That's what we do. Oops, I didn't do that. Right? You should not say it in the repetition of the Amidah, but everybody in the silent Amidah should pray for rain in Shomei Tefillah when they need rain. Now, the reason that there's a reluctance to pray for rain in the summer, for example, is because even though I might need rain, and even though my city might need rain, or my country, but it's fundamentally detrimental to everybody else around me. I live in Europe, and this part of Europe, I need rain, but that part I don't. And so even though it's good for me, it's bad for others around me. That's the rationale for saying that even a city or a whole country is like individuals, because other people around, it's going to be detrimental to them. Southern Hemisphere is exactly the opposite. It's not that we need to pray for rain for an extra month, start a month early or finish a month late, like the Rosh or like the Shulchan Aruch. Everything's topsy-turvy back front. Everyone in the Southern Hemisphere, South Africa and South America and Australia and New Zealand, it's exactly the opposite. Seasons and rain makes no sense. So what should they do in those? Should people living in the Southern Hemisphere follow the Siddur and start asking for rain from 60 days after the equinox, or should they do the opposite and ask for rain when they do? And for them, it's not even detrimental to those around them, because everybody in that whole half of the earth needs rain at that kind of time. And the answer seems to be, I don't know if this is, I don't really know anybody from Brazil, but it seems that there's a difference of opinion between the Jews in Brazil and the Jews in Australia, and I don't know what happens in South Africa. The first person to be asked a question from America, from the continent of America, I believe. Now, there was discussion at the time in the Netherlands in the 16th century, Menashe ben Israel, they sent Dutch Jews went to Brazil to colonize it, and the first Jewish community in the Americas was there, and they sent questions back. So they sent the following question to Chaim ben Shabbatai, who has 3 volumes of responsa, and I'll be honest, I've never heard of him before I was preparing for this year. But so they claim on Wikipedia, at any rate, that this is the first recorded responsa from the New World. And the question was, when do they start praying for rain? So he says, Shata shalchu mitam. So should we sheila. Shalchu mitam me'eretz rechoka mamlechut Brazil. Right? They sent me a letter from a faraway country from Brazil, Shehu makom rachok me'akava shavel etzadrom, which is far from the equator. It's in the southern hemisphere. And it says, Yamot HaShana, Hakol Seder Zmanim Mishtaneh. Right? The seasons are the opposite there. Sham Mikrais the Choref. Summer is winter. Shiamot HaChama Lehem Tishrei ad Nisan. Fiamot HaGeshamim min Nisan ad Tishrei. Their summer is, from the northern hemisphere, winter and vice versa. Because of this, they want to change the prayers, the Siddur. העניין שלה, ואז קרא לשאול גשמים בניסן עד תשרי, ושלא לשאול מתשרי עד ניסן. They want to pray for rain in their summer, in their winter, and not in their summer. וכן ואז קרא להזכיר גשמים מניסן תשרי, ושלא לשאול מתשרי עד ניסן. And similarly, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, they want to say at the appropriate time. That's the question. Tshuva, his answer is, כלל הדברים שנראה, I think the principle is, שבאותו מקום הנזכר בשאלה, I don't think they should be asking for rain in the bracha Birkat Hashanim at all during the year. Mitam dichtiv, right? I've explained in the summer, in the northern hemisphere summer, which is their winter, they shouldn't pray for rain and the blessing of rain because that's not what the rabbis of the Talmud said. And the northern hemisphere summer, which is their winter, whatever. They shouldn't ever ask for rain in that blessing because it's either going to be the wrong time for them or the wrong time for the Jews in Bavel. However, but when they do need rain in their winter, they should say it in Shomei Tefillah. He doesn't clarify whether that is also in the repetition of the Amidah or only in the silent Amidah. And that's my answer. Now this answer, this is the 15th, 16th, 17th century. I don't remember the date of this tshuva, but it's probably 1600 and something. There was nobody in Australia at that time, but when Jews came to Australia, they presumably looked at this tshuva and they started doing the same thing. And then a rabbi called Hershkowitz came to Sydney. I think he was only there for 2 years actually. But he got there and he wasn't happy with this at all. So he wrote, he's in the 19th century or even earlier 20th century. He wrote to a whole bunch of Jews in Europe, rabbis in Europe, and asked them if this was in fact correct to say the prayer for rain, to never say it in Birkat Hashanim and to say it in Shomei Tefillah when they need it or when they don't. And one of the people, in his book, he prints the first answers from Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, who was probably the greatest posek of his time in Eastern Europe in the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. So famous that Yeshiva University named their kollel after him, right? Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Elchanan Spector School. He had no connection to YU, but he was just the greatest posek of that time. So he disagrees with Chaim Shabtai and the Jews of Brazil. He says, right? In my opinion, that they don't ask for rain at all in the blessing. Right? Rabbi Hershowitz thinks this is a mistake. Kain dati gamkin. I also think it's a mistake. Dalpi dinhem chayavim laskir lishol gshamim. They have an obligation to say the prayer for rain and time for rain. Just like we say in the northern hemisphere. even in places that don't need rain at that time, you still have to ask for rain. In the winter, like it says in the Shulchan Aruch, Belishum Cholek, and nobody disagrees. Now, I know the Shulchan Aruch didn't know there was a southern hemisphere when he wrote his book, but nevertheless, Divrei Shulchan Aruch Anu Shomim. We follow the Shulchan Aruch. And that's what Jews do all over the world. They follow what it says in the Siddur, what it says in the Shulchan Aruch, regardless. In terms of saying, Ten Talu Matali Vracha, that's what they do. And then in terms of Shomei Tefillah, that's a separate thing. They can pray for their own personal needs. So those are the two options in the Southern Hemisphere. As far as I know, everybody follows Yitzchak Elchanan Spektor, but I haven't asked any Jews from Brazil. I'm running out of time, I've mentioned, but I want to talk about the 5th of December. I'm not very good at counting, but let's put it this way. In 2024, the autumnal equinox, according to Greenwich Time Museum, what's it called? Whatever. The Greenwich are the timekeepers of the world, aren't they? Because that's where the British Navy set off from when they were discovering the world or conquering the world. So the autumnal equinox for 2024 is Sunday the 22nd of September at 12:44 UTC. That's Universal something Greenwich Mean Time. It would be 1:44 because it's daylight saving time. That's the Northern Hemisphere autumnal equinox. Now, I tried to count, and I may have miscounted, but if you start on the September 22nd and you count 60 days, you get to November the 20th. I know that's wrong because the Shulchan Aruch tells me I'm wrong, but it's certainly not December 5th, which is when we start praying for rain, or the night before in both cases, right? So how do we get from November 20-something to December 5th? What's going on there? And Magen Avram says, Yom Shishim Kigon, Imet Kufab Yom Aleph, if, like this year, the equinox is on a Sunday, Hashela B'Tfila Arvit Hashech Yom Daled. So we'll start praying for rain on the Ma'ariv. I think that means like Tuesday night. Nimtza L'Olam Shnei Yamim Bein Tkufa L'Shela. There's always going to be 2 days between the equinox and when we start praying for rain, which is why I put this red circle on the 20th, which would be 2 days after the Sunday, or like Tuesday night, you'd start asking for rain 2 days afterwards. And that would follow what the Magen Avram says. It's always La'olam. It's always going to be like that. And Beit Yosef says, as Michael said at the beginning, Mashkav Dasikna Yom Shishim Kalachar Shishim Gam Zeh Sham, right? The 60th day counts as the first day we start asking for rain. K'tav Agad Maimoniet Perek Bet Kaimlan Yom Shkofa Matchil Nimsa Kshe'avru Nun Chet Yamim Min HaTkufa Sholim B'Tefila Arvit Shut Nun Tet. So you're counting both ends. You count the day of the equinox, you count the 60th day, so there's 58 days between, and then you start saying it that night, which means the beginning of day 59. Tav Rabbeinu Avraham, Yom Shishim Yavo B'Kaf Bet B'November, Im Haya Oto Februar B'Kaf Chet Yom. The Avraham, I can't remember his dates. Shulchan Aruch is 16th century. I can't remember which Ram. He's I don't know, 100 years earlier, 200 years earlier, something like that. He says we always start saying Tein Tal Matal Bracha on the 22nd of November, if February has 28 years. If that's a leap year, a secular leap year, then Tiashela B'Kaf Gimel November, they start asking for it on the 23rd of November. Ki Tkufat Tishrei Le'olam Shiva Yamim Kodim, because the equinox is always 7 days before that, meaning the 4th or 5th of October. Now, actually, I'm not sure that's right. In many copies of the Torah, you'll see someone has corrected in brackets and put in 5th of December, 4th of December, I guess, depending on where it's printed, to try and fix this mistake without realizing it's not a mistake. So we should be praying for rain from the 22nd of November. But again, it's not, I counted it as 20th of November because the equinox was here, but maybe I miscounted, or anyway, 22nd of November is approximately when we should start praying for rain. The reason we don't is because of Shmuel's calendar. Without going into this at length, Shmuel says, Shmuel's calendar, Shmuel lived in the 4th century in Bavel. His calendar is identical to what we call the Julian calendar. So he says, I don't really want to go into that when the time of the equinox. And similarly, the autumnal, this summer solstice. He says each season is exactly 91 and 7.5 hours long. And it moves half an hour every season. Now, if you do the math, this means that he calculates the length of the year as 365.25 days, which is the Julian calendar, and therefore every 4th year you have a leap year, and that means that your seasons, your solar year and your lunar year line up, and that is Shmuel's calendar. And the problem with that is that doesn't match the Gregorian calendar we use nowadays. The Gregorian calendar, the rule for leap years we have now is that it's slightly less than 365.25 days. Every year that is exactly divisible by 4 is a leap year. Fine, except the years that are exactly divisible by 100. But those century years are leap years, so those ones are leap years. But if they're exactly divisible by 400, then every 4 years is a leap year. Every 100 years is not a leap year, but every 400 years is a leap year. For example, the year 1700, 1800, 1900 are not leap years. The year 2000 is. So that means over the course of 400 years, the Gregorian and Julian calendars slip apart by 3 days, right? And so from the time of Julius Caesar, the 1st century BCE, until now, the calendar has slipped a bit. The Gregorian calendar was established by Pope Gregory in the 16th century. The main reason is because the Catholics wanted Easter to fall out in spring, and they noticed a whole bunch of people at different times, but they finally convinced the Pope that the Julian calendar was out, and that spring they were celebrating Easter too late in the year. And so, right, exactly. So therefore, Pope Gregory decreed that they would skip 10 years. So Thursday the 4th of October in papal countries was followed by Friday the 15th of October in 1582. They also changed the lunar calendar to make their calculations for Easter different, but they took off 10 years to catch up, and then they followed this new calendar of not having leap years, of not having leap years every 100 years unless it's a 400 year. This is a Gregorian calendar. It was 10 days out in 1582. Since then, we've had 1600 would have followed the pattern. 17, 18, 19, it's an extra 3 days that were out, so it would be off by 13 days now than they were then. And you can see, in fact, the Gregorian calendar was first adopted in 1582 by the Catholic countries. The Lutherans, the Protestants, thought this was a Catholic plot. They did not accept it for quite some time. Britain, not till 1752, so that's 170 years later. And one byproduct of Britain adopting this change to the calendar, the year used to begin on Lady Day on the 25th of March, and then they changed the calendar. There's reports of riots happening, that people weren't going to get paid for a whole month, or they were going to get paid and the employers were unhappy, and the taxes. They moved the calendar year to January 1st at the same time, but the reminder, or what's the word? The thing we still have now that alludes to Lady Day is that taxes in the UK are due on the 1st of April, I believe, which is 5 days after what used to be the first of the month. The Orthodox calendars, Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, celebrate their festivals 2 weeks after the rest of the Christian world, because they're still following the Julian calendar. And if you look at this list, Saudi Arabia only adopted the Gregorian calendar in 2016. I think now that means the whole world is using it. I'm not sure about about all of Switzerland. Anyway, China was, Russia was after the revolution, Greece 23, Turkey 26, and this area 2016. So now we use the Gregorian calendar. The world uses the Gregorian calendar. We Jews use the Julian calendar or Shmuel's calendar, and therefore our date has become the 4th/5th of December. If you would look at a Siddur from that, I spent too long looking online to find a Victorian Siddur that would say the 3rd/4th of December, and I couldn't find one, which is very disappointing. I thought that's what the internet was created for. So we didn't have the problem in 2000 because that's divisible by 400. But if you stick around until 2100, your Siddur will have to start say rain from the 6th of December. Fine. Igris Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, has a tshuva written in the 1950s, I think. Somebody wrote to him and said, the calendar's out. Why are we saying it on? Even if we follow the Shulchan Aruch, we should move our date. Right? We're using the wrong calendar. We're praying for rain at the wrong time. We're not even praying for rain when the Jews in Bavel needed it in the time of Rav and Shmuel. And Rav Moshe writes a very scathing response saying, do you think nobody's ever thought of this before? You're the first guy to figure this out. There must be a reason we're doing it. We don't mess with it. Great rabbis say this is what we do. And we should continue saying it on the day printed in the Siddur on the 5th of December and not be too clever with our dates and our times. So all of that is about Chutz La'aretz. To summarize, in Bavel there needs rain on the 60th day after the equinox. It ended up that all Jews outside of Israel start saying it from then, but if they needed rain at a different time, they should ask for it in Shomea Tefillah. And then because of the Gregorian/Julian calendar, we ended up saying it at the wrong time for that as well, but that's what we do because that's what we do. Now I want to talk about Israel very quickly. Why are we waiting 2 weeks to ask for rain when we do need rain? We should, once upon a time, it made sense to wait for the visitors to leave. Now it doesn't make sense. So the Ran lived in Spain, I don't remember, 14th century, 15th century. He says, why did Rabbi Elazar say the halach is like Rabban Gamliel, that we start praying for rain on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan? Rabban Gamliel lo amar hacha, ela mipnei takanatan shel olei regalim. Rabban Gamliel only said that because of the people going back from Aliyah L'Regel. Va'idna, but nowadays, Batar Churban, after the destruction of the temple, we shouldn't be worried about waiting for 2 weeks to start praying for rain. Rebbe Elazar lived, and Rebbe Gamliel lived after the destruction of the temple. Did he, if you want to say that he made this ruling at the time the temple stood, sorry, if you say he made this for when the temple is rebuilt, why would you paskin a halacha when Mashiach comes? Then Mashiach tells what to do when he gets here. The Ran will say there's another reason that we wait till the 7th of Cheshvan, not because of the people going back to Bavel, but because there are farmers who have fruit in the field and they want to harvest it before the rain begins. They need 2 weeks to bring in their fruits. And so even though the Gemara says the reason is because of the visiting Jews from Bavel, it's really because of the farmers in the field who want to bring in their fruit. So therefore, as a courtesy to everyone in Israel who needs to harvest their fruit, we wait 2 weeks before we start asking. And Ran says, HaGemara deba'at shedeleit lehu piri bedavra ve'ena makom tov ani ela tzorech geshamim kegon Eretz Yisrael shoin tekav achar chag. Ran says a place where there's not fruit in the fields and a place that is heavily dependent on rain, like Israel nowadays, should start asking for rain immediately after Sukkot. So then it would turn out everybody starts saying Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem immediately after Sukkot. And in terms of Ten Talumatav Rachat, there are three categories of people. Right, I'm just going to skip. The people in Bavel and outside Israel start saying it from the 60th day after the equinox. People who have places that have fruit in the field that need harvesting start saying it from the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, and other people in Israel who don't have fruit in the fields, or a time in Israel where if there are not fruit in the fields, should start saying it immediately after Sukkot. And he says that's what I think is correct. However, but then he says, what can I do? I've just lost the place.
Go to the next page.
Yeah, thank you. Aval Mayaset. But what can I do? Sharav El Fasi Zalois Kirbilchotav period Club. The Rif never mentioned this concept of fruit in the fields, and he only says the halacha Rabban Gamliel regardless, and therefore the Ran is forced to say the halacha is there's only two options. In Israel, 7th of Mar Cheshvan, and outside of Israel, 6 days after the equinox. So we're left with the situation that we, in Israel, are praying for rain. We're waiting 2 weeks when we really should be asking for rain. We're not. Outside Israel, everyone's praying not only for a place that doesn't need rain anymore, or at least a place where there aren't any Jews there virtually, but also, even if it would be, it's still the wrong time of year for them because the calendar's changed. And I'm just going to skip to the end. So I kind of got to this point in the Shir and thought, what's this all about? We're saying the wrong prayers at the wrong time. And then I realized how dependent we all are on the global economy, which we saw especially during COVID when Toyota invented this concept of just-in-time lean manufacturing. You just produce exactly as much you need and ship it to the next place. Britain was dealing with this significantly during Brexit. We all suffered from it during COVID, where any disruption to any part of the supply chain, the ship stopped moving for some reason, then we're all out of toilet paper. And we're all dependent. So we need to pray for rain in Bavel because we need the rain in Bavel. We need the rain all over the world to fall at the right time in the right place, in the right amounts, not with the hurricanes or typhoons and not with flooding that we just saw in Spain, but the right amount of rain at the right place, and that's going to benefit all of us wherever we are in the world. So finally, I think after 1,500 years perhaps of praying what feels like the wrong time in the last couple of decades, it makes sense for us to all be praying for rain, as it says in the Siddur. And so please God, we shall have a blessed year and a prosperous year and a fruitful year, and a year where we recognize the value of the global economy and of all people around the world to bring us our food and everything else we need. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.